Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each week. This is episode 33. Hope everybody's having a great week out there. Just great stuff going on over here at the Drum Shuffle World Headquarters. Today's episode is going to be just a little bit different. We will have live in the studio with us TJ Taylor from the band Soil. You may also recognize his name as the former drummer of Tantric. He will be joining me live in the studio in just a moment, so please stay tuned.
Los Cabos drumsticks may be the best kept secret from drummers today. Los Cabos drumsticks makes the finest tools to touch a drummer's hands in the business. The best news, almost every popular stick size is available in both white hickory and red hickory. If you don't know what red hickory is, it's made from the heartwood of the hickory tree, unlike regular white hickory, which is made from sapwood. Red hickory drumsticks will hold up to even the hardest hitting drummers. Their durability comes from the density of the wood, but they do not sacrifice the feel. Please visit LosCabosDrumsticks.com to learn more about their products. And don't forget to ask at your favorite retailer for Los Cabos drumsticks.
It's always a good day when you get to feature a fellow Kentuckian on your show, and TJ is no exception to that rule. TJ, of course, a proud Kentuckian, grew up over in the Lawrenceburg area of central Kentucky, and TJ makes his home now here in Georgetown, where I'm located. And TJ's just doing fantastic work out on the road with Soil and in the studio with those guys. Spent a few years in the band Tantric as well. TJ's just a monster drummer, so was really excited to have him here live in the studio this week. So help me welcome my friend TJ Taylor to the Drum Shuffle. TJ, welcome to Drum Shuffle World Headquarters. How are you, brother?
Doing good, man. Thanks. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Hey, so you are our first in-studio guest. You know, we normally do these on the phone, so I'm super excited to actually have you sitting here in the studio with us.
I'm glad to be on the maiden voyage.
It's all good.
In studio.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I mean, you and I go back a little bit kind of through social media, and we've ran in some of the same circles over the years. But I didn't realize that you actually lived here in my hometown until, we started talking about getting you on the show.
Yeah.
And you were like, well, I'm just right down the road. So I was like, well, we got to do it in person then, right?
Might as well.
Yeah. So TJ, what we typically do on the show is we always go back to the beginning. Tell us how you got into music to begin with, and how did you end up as a drummer?
Yeah. Well, I think, let's see, I was around 6 or 7 years old, and I think I'd seen the music video for Van Halen, Right Now.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think I was bit right then. I wanted to be a drummer, and of course I was young and asking my parents for a drum kit at that age. They just assume that it's something it's interesting at the time, but it's going to blow over. I'm not going to.
Oh, you got the same story I did. Yeah. We'll buy this, and then 6 weeks later, right.
So I had to, I guess, prove myself with being interested in drums. So I did the normal pots and pans thing, and I actually had a little keyboard that had a little drum pad on it. It was a little $5 Casio thing that had the kick drum, snare, and a couple times a little cymbal. And I think I learned how to play the drums by knowing how to do the beat on the keyboard.
Yeah, sure.
And luckily I had a neighbor across the street that had a drum kit that was sitting in the basement. It was sitting in about 2 inches of water.
Oh man.
And I was like, well, he probably doesn't need that drum kit if he doesn't mind if it's sitting in the water. It was stacked up in the corner. So I'd asked him if he was wanting to get rid of it. And I think it was a drum kit that he had in college, and it was sentimental, and he didn't want to let it go. So I must have asked him about the drum kit probably 60, 70 times over,
Right.
over the next few days. And then he gave up and came home one day and the drum kit was sitting on the front porch.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, so luckily, there we go. I had a drum kit. Bypassed mom and dad and went straight to
Yeah, well, that's the way
the basement, set it up, and there you go. I was ready to do it. So
yeah,
then,
that's the way to get anything done, right? If you can cut mom and dad out of the circle, that's fantastic.
And yeah, and then I remember I was so excited to play the drum kit. I got set up on a Sunday night, way late, and I was so excited to play it, but it was too late to play it. So the next morning, 6 a.m., I went downstairs, not knowing how loud the drums really were, started playing the drums, and I'm surprised that they didn't throw the drums out into the trash, but...
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you didn't know. And it's like, oh, okay, it's Monday morning. It's 6 a.m. I spent all night getting this set up. I'm going to go let it rip. And, you let it rip.
I did. And then I believe from then on, I started playing every Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, Alice in Chains, Van Halen, Soundgarden, everything I get my hands onto, I would go down to the basement and listen to the music and try to learn what the drums were doing, and kind of analyze it and start to make sense of what I was hearing and then try to play it on the drum kit. And it was funny because I didn't realize that the kick drum was the beat, I didn't realize you played it like, I thought the floor tom was the kick drum. I thought you played it with your hands.
Right.
And then I watched, a video. I was like, okay, they're not playing the floor tom like I think they are. That's the kick drum. So I adjusted it. You started using my foot. Of course, I'm 7 or 8 years old at this point. I'm trying. Right. I'm doing the best I can.
Yeah, I mean, you're just a young guy.
Yeah. And but once it made sense how the kick drum and the snare and the hi-hat worked together, it was came pretty easy. But then, that was. I think I played every Van Halen record, Soundgarden, Stone Temple Pilots, just wore them out.
Sure. Well, your story is very similar to mine, and we talked about this a little bit, before we sat down to start the interview. I do not come from an educated drumming background. I bought a drum set, put on the records, just play till your fingers bleed, until you have really bad calluses, just trying to figure stuff out. And I think you came from that same school. But one of the things that I really want to talk about, if anybody's ever seen any of your social media or any of your stuff, from your years in Tantric or with Soil, you play a very unique setup. You're a left-handed guy.
Yeah.
But you play a right-handed kit. So, we've talked about this a little bit. I guess you're more dominant with your right foot. So you play open-handed.
Yes.
And it's really unique. And I kind of said, maybe you have two brains because you do play left-hand lead, but yet when you start a roll down the toms, you start with your right hand. So have you just always played that way? Is that just what came naturally to you?
Yeah, learning how to play the drums, just watching drummers play. I noticed that the majority of the drummers were playing on the right side, but I just didn't have the control with my right hand crossing over and being left-handed. So I said, well, if I spread my arms apart and keep them separated, I can still control better and do the hi-hat work with my left hand and have more power with my right hand. So that made sense. But the next problem that I had was, setting a drum kit up to where you have, your ride cymbal in the right spot and then your toms not being in the way. So I had to find a way to alter the drum kit to where I could not have to cross my hands to play the ride cymbal.
Right.
And try to lead the drum kit with my left hand, but it still was easier to lead with my right hand.
I gotcha. Okay.
So it would, I guess maybe out of just learning to play that way, I naturally led with my right hand. I moved the cymbal over to where it's directly in front of the snare drum, and then I moved my rack tom. I usually have one rack, and I have it centered or basically to the right of the ride cymbal, and then I do 2 down, so 2 floor toms. And
the modified Bonham.
The modified Bonham. That's what it is.
That's fantastic.
The only unfortunate thing for me is where I'm having the tom if I put it on a snare stand, like if I had to get a good sized tom, it's too far to the right to naturally play it to where it makes sense. So I have to get a smaller tom and mount it, right on top of the kick drum beside the cymbal. So I'm kind of limited on what I can play because of the fact that the tom has to be close enough,
right,
to play it that way
for it to make sense for your style.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, when I watch videos of you playing, it amazes me, because obviously I'm a right-handed guy. I play traditionally, like so many drummers do. When you walk into an audition or a studio session or anything like that, how many of the raised eyebrows do you get?
Constantly.
People go, wait a minute, you're going to play like that? I can see a studio engineer going, oh man, I don't know how to mic you up.
On tour, the sound guy comes up and he's always saying, I'm looking at your input list, I'm looking at your drum diagram. This is kind of weird. I guess you're doing one rack tom and there's a cymbal here. And then I'm like, yeah, it's just, it's kind of like a hybrid lefty righty is what I call it. It's just it's a hybrid of the two. It's like I took two,
Really, you're just switching the ride cymbal and the rack tom.
Yeah.
I mean,
and a lot of times we would share drum kits with other bands just to make it simple, like festivals and stuff. And I had to explain to them that I could share a drum kit, but I'm going to have to switch the tom and the ride cymbal.
And I'm sure everybody's just like, what are you talking about?
Like, what's wrong with this guy?
That's fantastic. Yeah. Well, so growing up, you said you got your first kit when you were like 6 or 7 years old and you were just playing along with records, all that. When did you start, kind of forming your garage bands? When did you start doing your thing?
Well, I guess probably middle school.
Okay.
Yeah, we had some friends that play guitar and we didn't have a bass player. I think we didn't grab a bass player till high school.
Okay.
We didn't know it didn't matter. We had the guitar and the drums. It was good enough. You were
just going to jam.
Yeah, we were just jamming, and we were jamming on some Megadeth and some Metallica covers, and we were learning how to do it.
Sure.
We were trying to write songs too. And they were usually we scrap them, but we tried. And then when I got into high school, we got a little more serious with it. And we found a singer, which was the guitar player's brother, and we found a bass player, and we started learning some cover songs, and we tried to get some gigs and stuff, and we ended up getting some gigs, at a local bar, and of course I wasn't of age yet, so
none of us were.
I wasn't able to leave the stage. I had to we'd do a set. I'd have to sit on the stage for the next 20 minutes till the next set started. We'd do another set, sit and wait on the stage, and we pretty much did that, 2 or 3 nights a week. And then we got pretty good at the cover thing, and then started writing some more music. And then we gigged as much as we could, and
sure,
we gave it, the best stab that we could give. And we eventually, in college, same way.
Okay.
We just doing the local band thing. And
when did you throw your hat in the ring as a professional musician? In other words, did you go searching for an established band to join? Because I know you were in Tantric for a while, and obviously those guys are from our area, to a certain degree, and they had some success, obviously, when you joined the band. Were you looking for that situation, or were you just wanting to play more music?
Well, being a drummer, it's it's really hard, to form a band, and there's just so much that goes into doing it. I thought I'd take the easy way out and try to join a band. I'm
Sure.
like, I was bypass the whole starting a band thing. But the, like you said, luckily in Louisville, Tantric was taken off, and they were, they'd had a few, kind of platinum record and
right.
a few good hits and stuff. And one of the bands that I was playing in, the bass player had started a relationship with Hugo, working relationship with playing or doing some producing and bringing some bands and stuff into a bar that he was working at, or that he was actually, Hugo had done some promoting, I guess, at a club in Louisville.
Okay.
And so the bass player had a working relationship with him, and he was wanting to do a solo record and needed a drummer.
Okay.
So he gave me a phone call, and of course I was ecstatic to do it because I loved Tantric. I listened to Tantric when I was in high school and stuff, and I was aware of what Tantric was. So I went to Louisville and we started jamming, and he decided to do the Tantric thing. This is, let me rewind here. I guess this was probably 6 or 7 years after the second record, Tantric's second record. They basically the Maverick Records, who they had signed to, went bankrupt and folded. And
which that was Madonna's label.
Yes, Madonna's label.
So I mean,
Madonna's who found Tantric. Actually, it's funny. Yeah,
really.
Yeah, she.
Oh, now see, I don't know this story, so now you got a dish.
Yeah, she had, of course, Days of the New helps. The fact that the guys were in Days of the New, and so they had that going for them. But Madonna was pitched the first Tantric record, and she said, "Yeah, sign them. Let's have a rock band. Let's do it."
Really?
Yeah.
I see. I did not know that. I mean, I knew Maverick was Madonna's label, and when you say the label goes bankrupt, I'm thinking, well, it didn't really have to happen.
yeah. But that was early 2000s, and things were kind of changing with the whole Napster was starting to the labels were all kind of changing their business plans and the way they did things. And
well, it was right after the Seagram's deal too. The alcohol company Seagram's 7 or whatever. Seagram's came in and bought, gosh, I want to say 12 or 14 record labels overnight, just kind of consolidated them. A&M went away, Enigma went away, Capitol, kind of reformed after all that. So it was a weird time. So your point is well taken. So I interrupted, so I'm sorry for that. But so Tantric had, put out a couple of records. Hugo, I guess, was talking about doing a solo record.
Doing a solo record. He spent 6 years trying to get this solo record together, I think, and
as solo records go, yeah.
And he had acquired the name Tantric after the breakup and everything, and he decided to go ahead with Tantric. And he had at that time gotten a drummer from Fuel, Kevin Miller.
Oh yeah,
played drums, and kind of redid the lineup. He got a couple of guys from Boston. Joe Pesci, I think, and Eric Leinhart was the bass player. And these guys were they're killer players I think they're from the Boston area, but he
hired guns.
Yeah. And he put the record out, The End Begins, and then they had the song Down and Out, which was fairly successful, did pretty good on the rock charts. And so Tantric kind of had another wind, and but then they split apart again. A lot of the band members went a different direction. I think that Kevin Miller, the drummer, had left the band. They got a new drummer. A few years later, they put out another record, Mind Control, and toured on it for about a year. And another band lineup come in, and that was when I was able to step in. And Hugo I'd talked to Hugo several times and showed him interest in wanting to play in the band.
Sure.
And he was doing some pre-production for the new record, 37 Channels. And I came in and did some recording with him and told him that, if he's wanting to do some touring and stuff, that I'm more than happy to come on board and do it. So he finished the record and gave me a phone call, and next thing you know, I'm in Tantric. So
wow.
Yeah, we toured, probably 300 days of the year for the next 2 or 3 years.
That much?
It's
really?
nonstop, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we went out and we would do probably 3 to 4 weeks on, take a week off, 2 weeks off here and there. But like I said, it wasn't consistently.
Right.
But we toured as much as we could possibly tour, and did that album cycle. And then we put out a B-side record with a lot of previous recorded stuff that he had laying around his computer, and a few other songs, a couple new songs we put together, and then some acoustic versions of Breakdown and Morning.
Sure.
And and then we toured that cycle, which was another probably 300 shows. And then
wow. It's just a lot,
Yeah.
you know. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, I get asked all the time. You know, folks will say, you know, going out on a big rock and roll tour, it's it's got to be fun. You're making all this money and you're seeing the world and all that. And
Oh, you never see the world. You see the bunk in your tour bus.
right. Well, and you know, I mean, the joke, and I don't know who said this, so I'm not going to give credit where credit's due, but somebody said, you know, the life of a touring musician is an hour of sheer exhilaration, you know, surrounded by 23 hours of the worst boredom you can imagine.
That nails it.
Yeah. So
pretty much. Yeah. You got to learn how to entertain yourself. And, you know, they say that, touring is, or being in a band like that is not so much about how good of a player you are as much as it is how good of a hanger you are. If you can hang, if you can do the hang, you can pretty much do it, because, you know, you're, like you said, you're playing for an hour and 15 minutes and you're stuck in a tube with 6 or 7 other people for the next, 23 hours.
Yeah. And if you're a jerk,
yeah,
you will find yourself unemployed very
fast. Yeah,
very
absolutely.
Quickly.
Yeah.
So in this time, I mean, you know, and I'm assuming you're still, when you're doing these big tours, you're still a young guy. You're a little bit younger than me, you know, but did you have a family at the time? And I mean, I guess I want you to relay, you know, being on the road 300 days a year, it's not exactly easy to be married or have a girlfriend, or, you know, you don't even see your parents, you don't see your siblings, you know, to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's probably a little easier now than it ever has been, because, you know, with cell phones, FaceTime.
Yeah.
FaceTime is huge, especially when you have kids, you know, to be able to see your kid and talk to them every night and stuff, that makes it so much easier, you know. But then there's I've always been able to do the FaceTime thing since I've been touring, but with the guys in Soil, you know, I remember the days when, you know, you tell your girlfriend, you know, hey, I'll talk to you in 4 days, you know, I'll call you in 4 days. And there was no pressure to keep up with them. You go out and 4 days later they call and they have an hour-long conversation. I'll talk to you another 4 days or whatever, you know?
Right.
But now, you know, if you go a couple hours without texting or calling, they get a little nervous and wonder what you're doing.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I wouldn't have any other way. I love being able to call and chat and see my wife's face, see my kid's face. And, you know, it really takes the kind of the monotony of touring out a little bit to be able to have that connection to kind of bridge the two together, you know? So, yeah, but you know, it has its drawbacks when you're touring, for example, in Europe, and, you know, the time schedule has been flipped and you're trying to call them at 3 a.m. and, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 8 in the morning for me or whatever it would be. It got a little tough then, but overall it's, you know, the FaceTime's it's a lifesaver.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm sure it is a lot easier nowadays. You know, I'm an old timer. You know, the last serious like overnight stuff that I did was in the late 90s, you know, in very early 2000s. So, you know, it was a little bit different. Everybody didn't have a cell phone back then.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, cell phones were still, you know, 30 cents a minute or whatever back, you know, when I was doing it. So you didn't have the cell phone kind of thing. Well, you mentioned Soil, and I know that you just wrapped up a really nice run with those guys.
Yeah.
And Tantric was on the bill with you. It was kind of one of those package tours. Was it cool to see those guys? It was cool.
It was like an ex-girlfriend thing, though, for sure. Like, and I hadn't met the guys in the band, the new lineup, and it was funny. It was like, you know, I was on the side stage watching their set and stuff, and they kept looking at me, and I'm looking at them, and I'm trying to show my enthusiasm, because it's like I feel like they think that I'm judging them, but I'm not judging them. It's just, you know, it's definitely a weird. It's like the ex-girlfriend that's trying to see, you know, is a drummer better than me? No.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's cool. We got along great. You know, it was good to see Hugo again, and just
healthy competition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of how it is. Well, it was a really cool package. I know you had Saliva, Soil was on the show, Tantric, and you told me earlier
Puddle of Mud. Yeah, and then another band called Shallow Side.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys did, it was several weeks that you were out on the road. Tell me a little bit about the reception on these shows. I mean, was it just crazy?
They were great. Yeah. We, of course, the tour is still going. We still had to drop off about a quarter way through the tour because of other things going on with the band and stuff. But the shows we were doing, we started in North Dakota, and we did a couple big venues, and people were showing up. And when people show up on a Tuesday, Wednesday night, and fill the house, that's a good sign, But with a tour package like this, it's not too hard to sell tickets. So it was a great tour. It's kind of an era tour, I guess, because Puddle of Mud, Saliva, Tantric, Soil, they all kind of were the, 2000 late or early to mid 2000s, I guess,
Right.
So, it was a great tour.
So how did you end up hooking up with the Soil guys? Where are they originally from, and how did you get meshed in with those guys? I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, the bass player, Tim, he works at the label Pavement, which Tantric was or still is signed to. He was our A&R guy for for 3 years.
Yeah, okay.
He we struck a friendship up. We toured with Soil probably, I think we did a couple tours, so a couple months worth of shows with them, and just kind of struck up a friendship and stuff. And me and Tim would hang out and drink some beers together and stuff. And
sure.
But with Tim though, you got to watch it because he'll make you drink his entire cooler of beer. And but we had a friendship, and I was parting ways with Tantric. I just kind of told Tim, I said, hey, if you guys, I don't know, I know you have a drummer, but if whatever happens and you guys ever need a drummer, I love the band, love to come jam with you guys, just throwing it out there, just more or less in conversation. And I guess it was 2 years later after I'd said that, I get a phone call from Tim. He was like, all right, you ready to do it? I'm like, ready to do what? He was like, we need a drummer, man.
That's awesome.
Come up to Chicago and let's do this thing. So, so I drove to Chicago and did kind of an audition rehearsal, and we started a tour the next couple weeks. Went out with Saving Abel, and it was all good, man. I've been the band ever since.
Nice. Okay, so you were kind of a known commodity, and
everybody knows each other in these circles. When you tour together, and it's the best thing about touring is you build these relationships up, and once you kind of get in the circle and kind of get to knowing everybody, if you have a pretty good attitude and you don't, you're not a jackass,
right?
You can call people up and say, hey, I'm looking for a gig, and they'll extend their hand and sometimes either push you in the right direction or make a phone call to somebody they know looking for somebody, and that's what happened to me with Soil. And
well, and I think the cool thing is, it's I don't know that I've ever joined a band. I mean, and I've certainly never done anything on the level that you're doing it on, but I've never joined a new group of guys to play music that it wasn't like, oh, you should call Jamie. He would be a really good fit for this, and it's the same thing for TJ. It's, oh man, you got to talk to TJ. He's your guy. It's all word of mouth in this business. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. And, I see guys on the internet every day. They're doing, Instagram videos of them just absolutely shredding. I mean, I can find a 9-year-old girl on YouTube now.
I get so I try to watch some of those videos. I'm just like, oh man.
Why do I even?
What am I doing?
Exactly.
I can't play like that if I even wanted to. It just blows my mind. But there's a place. There's drummers that can kill it on Instagram and YouTube, and a lot of that style of drumming may not be applicable when you're doing songs, you know? So I think that it's easy to get discouraged when you watch that and think, oh, I'm not good enough. This guy, or this lady playing these drums and tearing it up, and she's killing it, and I can't even do that. So why would I even, she doesn't even have a big gig playing for, but it's, you have to realize it's just a different thing. It is.
For sure. Well, I mean, one of the guys that we had on the show, and I come back to this story all the time, so I apologize to my listeners, but Johnny Rabb was on the show.
Yeah.
And at one time, he was the world's fastest drummer, know, and he's in Collective Soul now, which is one of the great songwriting bands of the 90s.
Yes.
Period. Yeah. But he was like, nobody cares that I can play 1,800 beats in a minute doing single stroke rolls.
Yeah.
If I can't play the song, it's like none of that matters if you can't groove. And, I think that's one of the cool things about your particular style of drumming is it always grooves, and I think it's, you're not a classic overplayer. It's, in that genre of music, kind of the modern guitar rock stuff, you can find drummers that overplay everything.
Oh, yeah.
And, you always groove. It's always tasteful. So tell me a little bit about some of your influences. You mentioned Alex Van Halen, of course.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me what created TJ as a drummer.
Yeah. Well, John Bonham. Let's just say John Bonham, period.
There you go. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Drum Shuffle, folks, because TJ and I have run out of influences,
It's the thing, John Bonham's influenced every other drummer, so it's hard to say, it's like there's a degree of John Bonham in every rock drummer in the history of rock drumming. But, John Bonham was a huge influence. And let's see, I guess, I started, Soundgarden, Matt Cameron, terrific drummer, and I always loved how he had a little bit of a swing style to him. He could swing it just enough to where, it was still that pocket hard rock groove, but it still kind of had some movement to it, and I always appreciated that. I listened to, let's see, Alex Van Halen was always a huge influence, and Lars Ulrich.
Yeah.
I know he's not a flashy drummer, but he's one of the most solid drummers, He's without Lars, I think Metallica would have sounded completely different. Obviously, it's I like drummers that can really, really define the music that they're playing for, always like drummers like Kenny Aronoff. Kenny Aronoff is just a great drummer. He's played on so many songs that we probably wouldn't even realize was Kenny.
I know. And, it does not fail if you turn on like the Academy Awards or the Kennedy Center Honors or the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Kenny's there.
He's the one guy that that you can trust to nail the part. He charts them out. He'll do the chart out every little hit and smack, and he can play the set top to bottom without a single issue, and that's good to, that's great that there's drummers out there that can do that. I sure as heck can't do that. I can kind of chart, but my memory is the only way I can play. I'm a memory drummer, and that only goes so far. I can't learn an entire set the night before and then play it, flawless. So, well, hats off to people like Kenny Aronoff who can do that.
Right. Well, it goes without saying. I could not step into the Dream Theater gig.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, first of all, I don't have the technical ability to even play it. And secondly, I would never be able to memorize, a technical opus that's 13, 14 minutes long, like a Portnoy or a Mangini, those guys are just gods, as far as technical prowess is concerned. When we talk about influences, you said Bonham, and, I think it goes without saying, everybody says Bonham, and here's the thing that I'm curious about, and I ask a lot of people this, Bonham was, and this is just my opinion only, Bonham was the guy that had the groove, the chops, the power, the finesse. It's like usually if you find a really great drummer, they're only going to have 2 or 3 of the 4.
Yeah, that's so true. Yeah.
Ingredients. You know what I mean? So I guess I'm curious, are you more of a groove or a finesse? What would you say your strong suits are as a drummer?
Groove, yeah. I think that I always lean towards, all my favorite drum parts are parts with heavy grooves, the finesse, I would hope that I could bring finesse to the groove, drummers like Morgan Rose from Seven Deaths,
Yeah.
monster smasher drummer, but he's also got this groove that nobody, like Seven Dust wouldn't be Seven Dust without Morgan's drumming. You know? And
he also looks like he's killing his dinner back there. I mean, it's just, I mean, his arms bend.
I don't see how they bend that way. I don't know how it's like he throws his arm completely around his back and then back around again. Like it's not even attached to his body. Every time I watch him play, I'm always just sitting there with my jaw dropped, wondering how he's doing it.
Yeah. How do you do that? It can't be taught.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So, the stuff that you're doing now with Soil, you said there were some other things going on with the band. Not looking for a scoop or anything like that. I'm no journalist. I'm just a drummer. But some new music on the horizon.
Yeah, we're working on trying to get, maybe 2019, try to put out maybe an EP of, 6 or 7 songs maybe. We threw around the idea of doing another record, full-length record.
Sure.
But, it's just, the industry's kind of it's a weird place. The albums.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the way people consume music anymore. Most people have some type of, account like a Spotify or a, iTunes Music. And it's people are kind of a little more wishy-washy about what they listen to. They rather listen to a playlist with, 200 songs on it rather than, get attached to a single record anymore. So, it's we'll see how it goes. I guess we might do a full record. We might just do an EP and then do a full record after that at some point. But we're working on. We're going to focus on 6 songs right now and keep touring.
It sounds like there's no pressure.
There's
really.
With a band like Soil too, that's been around, 20 years now.
Right.
They're at the point now where they just want to do what they want to do. They're not trying to.
The label's not standing there.
Well, the label is the bass player, so it's like he co-owns the label, so it's hard to,
the boss isn't calling. Where's my record?
Yeah.
Well, that's a good spot to be in, for sure. What is the writing process like with Soil? Do all of you guys get in a room together? Or?
Yes. Yeah. They have. It's not a band where you do a demo and you send some drum machine stuff over and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I can't play that.
Right.
It's too much. It's a little too fast, a little too many double kick drum hits there or whatever. But no, with this band, it's more organic. We get into a room and with no intention of, or no, usually there's not even a riff or anything. We sit down, we look at each other, and the first person to start playing something, if we feel it, we'll start grooving into it and we'll kind of move with it. And then, we'll try to throw as many ideas out there as we possibly can, and whatever sticks, we kind of go with. And
it's kind of the old school way of doing it, really. I mean, I think, you brought up a good point, and I want to explore this a little bit. And I don't know if you've ever done I'm going to fly my drum tracks to you via Dropbox and all that. I mean, it's still making music, don't get me wrong. And, of course, we had the great Matt Chamberlain on the show not too long ago, and he makes his living doing drum tracks for folks and sending it out, and he's very critical of his playing. He wants to make sure his clients are happy and everything. But it seems like every time I've been in the situation of, okay, here's a riff, see what you can put to it, send it back to me, then I'll, see if you're playing inspired something. It always feels like it's lacking that, 4 or 5 dudes in a room making music vibe. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I just love getting in a room and it's like, let's see if anything happens. Yeah. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But one of the things that I've learned over the years is, now there's no such thing as tape. You're you're doing it in Pro Tools, always have the mics on.
Always. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We usually, we'll turn a phone on, start recording from the phone and just leave it rolling. We have 3 hours of songwriting to weed through and try to figure out what ideas we liked,
Yeah.
And sometimes you playing back, you'll hear things that you didn't realize that when you were all together writing that, that was actually a pretty cool riff. We could probably take that and, we'll jot that down and use that in the next session or whatever. But, it's, there's something to be said about, 5 guys in a room together for sure. When there's a humanization factor that goes into it that, that really feeding off of each other, you can almost hear it. You can feel it, you can hear it. And when if you record the guitars and then send the guitar tracks to the drummer, he records the drums, the bass player and the drummer, there's a relationship there. There's a push and pull thing that goes on. And if the drummer's already made his mind up and recorded it and it's done, and then the bass player kind of has to conform what he was playing, and it's just, I don't think it's as it doesn't have the same sparkle to it as it would if you were all in the room working it out, and then you play off of each other rather than what.
Absolutely. And in this day and age, everything is, play it to a click track, snap it to the grid. Yeah. Everything has to be so perfect. And, I think it takes a lot of the life out of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that we as drummers shouldn't be able to play with a click and lock onto it, but going back to Bonham, if you ever listen to Led Zeppelin stuff with a metronome, he's all over the place. Yeah. A song that starts out at, let's say 110 BPM might end at 140.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some wide swings in tempo in that music. The Stones, same thing. The Beatles, same thing.
Yeah.
You take those three bands together and they've sold like 1 billion records, right? So it's not about snapping everything to the grid. No. So there's something else to it, And I always tell people, you got to be prepared to play with the click, but sometimes not snapping everything to the grid, letting a song breathe, bring something to it that I think just that single-minded obsession of it has to be perfect. That's not what the studio is about to me. Anything's possible in the studio and you want it to be as good as it can be. But I think it's cool that you guys are, in a room together writing and learning, does this song need to be played at what tempo? Yeah. And it's not just, here's the riff, TJ, play this at 123 BPM, snap to the grid kind of thing. I feel like it takes some soul away from it for sure.
Yeah.
Talking about the recording process. Now you've done some records obviously in your career. Give some advice to folks listening. You've recorded with Tantric, obviously. You've recorded with Soil. I know you work with local artists here in Central Kentucky as well. I've harped on it for, episode upon episode of the show. But give us some advice about going into the studio with somebody. I mean, what do you try to do when you show up?
Well, the biggest thing is just try to understand, how they envision, the recording coming out. I could go in there and I could try to do what I think is cool, from a drummer's perspective. But at the end of the day, the song has to win, every time. The song, it's all about the song. And I think that if you could take the approach of less is more, obviously, I think that goes a long way. And usually the way I do it is I'll go into the studio and I'll kind of track the drums as simple and as very clean cut as possible. And if there's a place in the song that might call for a little more, I'll start punching in and adding in maybe some fills that are a little more interesting or a little more intricate stuff. But overall, just try to keep it simple and to make sure that the song is not getting lost in a drummer's head trying to be a drummer. You know what I mean? And I think that every musician should have that approach. I feel like, from the guitars to the bass guitar, and that at the end of the day, it's the gestalt of everything together that makes the song. It's not any part over the other. It's and I think if you can take that approach to it, it usually has better results.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it was Hal Blaine said once, he said, a good song doesn't care who drums on it.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. And and I've heard that, all different, ways, a good song doesn't care who sings it. A good song doesn't care who plays guitar on it, kind of thing. But, Hal Blaine was one of those guys that, I mean, my God, if you listen to music in the 60s, he's probably 20 of your favorite drummers. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because he played with everybody, just that massive, recording library that he was part of. So, I mean, I think that's really good advice to say, play for the song. And I think a lot of people, especially early in their career, when they get into a recording studio, it's like, oh, now it's time for me to show my best Jeff Picaro.
Yeah. Neil Peart. Yeah.
I'm going to go into lick fest here, kind of thing. And so I think that kind of gets lost. One of the traditions of our show as well, TJ, is we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice. Obviously, you've had a very successful career, and, I have mad respect for you, because a lot of guys would say, well, you have to go where the action is. You got to move to New York, you got to move to LA, you got to move to Nashville, kind of thing. Here we are, two guys that love playing drums. We're sitting in Georgetown, Kentucky tonight. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we make our home here in Georgetown, Kentucky, which is not a musical hotbed. But so you've had all this, career success living here. Give us some advice, and it doesn't have to be about where you're located geographically necessarily, but share some advice with our listeners,
Well, the biggest thing I can say is don't be a jerk.
Yeah.
Don't be a jerk. That goes such a long way. If you can have a good attitude, I think you can move to Nashville, or you can move to Los Angeles or New York. But if you can't be a decent person to be around, you're not going to get gigs. You can, especially if you go somewhere where there's, like Nashville, you can go down there. Everybody in Nashville plays music. Everybody, the person serving your pizza at the pizza place is a musician that's probably played for pretty big records, probably. There's the only way to, my best advice to move your career forward is to just be a good person and help people out, and just connect people to other people, and they'll do the same for you. So,
I think a lot of people say, well, you have to get lucky. You have to have a big break. And that's true to a certain extent, but one of my heroes is Rod Morgenstein, one of my all-time favorite drummers, and he said, luck favors the prepared. Which I think was it was brilliant words that he gave to me as his piece of advice. Luck favors the prepared. So you have to put in the time, you have to practice, and that's
the harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement as well. Which kind of brings me to another line of questioning. What is your practice routine like? I know that you work with, when you're off the road, you're not doing your main gig, that you're working with local artists. I know you've played with Allie Ann, great country kind of thing, pop country kind of gig here locally. What's your practice routine like besides playing other gigs? Do you set up a kit and play every day?
Yeah, I have a studio built in my basement, and basically I try not to touch that kit when I tour. I don't take anything from it. I try to keep that kit always set up with cymbals and drums and everything. And then, for me, my practice routine is, I wish it was a little more organized and a little more thought out, but it usually consists of me going down in the basement when I have a spare minute and just throwing down whatever I feel like throwing down. Usually it's playing simple grooves and just kind of trying to vibe a little bit and kind of see where it goes, And I wish I focused more on learning drumming a little more, I think. I
know I did.
I've never been one to work on rudiments and stuff. I've always been just kind of like, let's sit down and play and see what happens, more or less. And it's probably been more of a curse than anything, because it's easy to get into a place to where you're not as creative as you could be, I guess, because you're not pushing yourself that way. But at the same time, I'm learning to understand myself as a drummer a little better, I think, because of it. I'm trying to be a little more, I guess, a little more creative with it, I guess. But, there's a place for technicality. There's a place for all that, the stuff that I probably should learn to do, but I always put it off for later, I guess,
Yeah.
But it helps too. Doing cover gigs and stuff is a great practice tool, because you're learning to, you're learning to be a better memorizer. You're learning to, there's a lot of things that go into playing a cover gig. It's not just trying to, in country and rock or whatever, there's a lot of intricate stuff going on. You gotta, there's a lot of parts that I wouldn't otherwise have learned if I wasn't doing the gig. And I've put that in my toolbox for later, little things and stuff. And, that's probably the most of the practice that I'm doing is either just playing for fun or just trying to learn whatever song I have to learn for the next gig or whatever it is. So.
Right. Well, you bring up a really good point, and we've talked about memorization a few times in our time together tonight. I get accused of being the guy that never forgets a song.
That's great.
Well, yeah, it is, and I'm very lucky, but it's because I don't have a ton of chops, in my toolbox. So I always, made it incumbent upon myself. I'm going to remember this song, that it's verse, chorus, then the middle eight, then verse, chorus, whatever the case may be. And, when I get together and jam with guys, like the guys from Funnel that I haven't, jammed with much at all over the past 5-6 years, we get together and we start running through a song, and invariably everybody looks at me and goes, is this the bridge? You know what I mean? And that's not me bragging. It's just the way I had to be as a player. I had to know where the song is going. Do you find yourself being that guy, that you're the arranger of the bands that you're in?
Probably not as much as I find myself looking to the bass player a lot.
Okay.
Like all right. I'm going to look for his cue or look for the guitar player to say, I'm going to wait for this little cue here. Because, it's a lot of times when the chorus is coming, there's all these little things that happen. Like, hey, this is going to be the chorus. If I'm unsure for some reason, it's like, okay, that's definitely going to be the chorus. And here we go. And then from that point on, I'm like, okay, I'm more confident with it. But I don't think I've ever been, I don't know. I mean, even though I'm a memory player, being the one that it's 100% certain with the song, I'm still there's still a lot of room for, I hope I don't miss this cue here.
Well, now, I never said I'm 100%. So there's a difference. But
I don't want to be relied upon to be the dude even though that's the gig is being, knowing those cues and stuff. But I find myself looking at the bass player more than I should, I think.
Yeah.
For that type of thing.
Well, I don't know what it is, but I've even been in musical situations where somebody would say, what are the first words? And I'm like, you tell me and we'll both know, brother, because I'm not a singer, nobody wants to hear me sing. I can barely do, background vocals in a studio, and that's with some help, sweeten it up a little. But, I think it's interesting that us as drummers, what we bring to the mix is different than what a guitarist brings to the mix. Besides the obvious, we're playing a percussive instrument. I think that drummers tend to make better arrangers. In other words, guitar players get this riff stuck. And I'm not just picking on guitarists, but this riff goes this way. It goes this way. You mentioned Lars Ulrich earlier, Inner Sandman, arguably the biggest song they ever recorded. It was he that went to Kirk Hammett and said, that's a great riff, but put this little tail on it.
Yeah.
And it became that song,
Yeah, iconic guitar part now.
The iconic guitar part.
By the drummer.
By the drummer, exactly.
Yeah.
And he's not a guitarist. So I think we bring a different... I don't know. Maybe it's because we think of life in 4s and 8s and 12s and 16s. I don't know if that's what it is or not. But do you find yourself playing that role in the writing process, or are you just kind of a go with the flow kind of guy?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think especially in the beginning of the writing, it's more of a kind of go with the flow and see where it's going, and then a lot of times I'll try to lay the groove to where I can lead them in a way where they kind of, okay, that's kind of where this is going. And then, so I'd say probably for the most part, it's more me trying to take the groove in a certain direction and hope that they follow. And if they don't, then we'll take it back to the drawing board and start over. But
yeah, I think I don't know. I just think it's bred into us as drummers that we want to steer the ship.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're going to go over here now, or no, we're going to go this way now. I find it interesting, and I always like to ask people that and how they work. TJ, I certainly appreciate your time. I mean, this has just been fantastic. I want to be respectful of your time. You know, I don't want to.
It's been a blast, man. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, it goes without saying, man. You're welcome here anytime. I mean, heck, we're practically neighbors. You know, we need to, you know, when you're not on the road, maybe we can give you a co-hosting gig or something like that. You know.
Oh yeah.
Come hang out and talk drums anytime, man. But I really do appreciate you doing it, and keep us posted on what's going on. You know, when Soil gets back into the studio, if you guys get, you know, an album, an EP release, certainly bring it to us. We'd love to share it with the world. That would be awesome, man. So don't be a stranger. Come back and see us anytime.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you real soon. All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 33 of the Drum Shuffle. Really appreciate each and every one of you tuning in. We cannot do what we do without every single one of you guys. So thanks so much for tuning in. I ask every week, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're using to listen in. It helps us tremendously to continue to grow here at the Drum Shuffle. And you're not going to want to miss some of the guests that we have coming up here over the next few weeks. So hit that subscribe button. We love hearing from you throughout the week. I love getting your emails. You can reach us at thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com. And of course, you can find my ugly mug over at jamieeads.com. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. We're going to be joined by great educator and jazz drummer next week by the name of Jay Lawrence, so you're not going to want to miss that. So until next time, as always, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.